The Torah uses a fascinating phrase in discussing the sacrifices, one that clashes with our modern ears. It refers to the sacrifices as reach nichoach, a pleasing scent to God. And this seems something that's very human, sensuous, sensual, too anthropomorphic to be used to referring to God. And this is reinforced when the Torah says in Noach that God smelled the pleasing scent and he vowed not to destroy the world. Somehow he was moved, he was pleased by this in a very human way. And this makes us think of a pagan world in which sacrifices are the food of the gods. Now, the Torah doesn't say that. It says that the sacrifices are lechem isheh, the food of the fire, because the fire consumes them. But even though the fire consumes them, this smoke and the aroma rises up, and God, as it were, is smelling them and being pleased by them. So this idea that is so shocking to our ears is one of the reasons why Rambam says that ultimately sacrifices is not really what the Torah wants and what God wants. He says that sacrifices were a concession for people at the time because that's how they believed God needed to be worshipped. But all of this imagery is really just for people to understand and relate to it, but ultimately God doesn't want sacrifices, God wants our prayers. Ramban pushes back, and Ramban says, no, of course there's an intrinsic value in sacrifices, otherwise the Torah wouldn't refer to them as a pleasing odor. But that's exactly, I think, why Rambam says that can't be literal and has to be understood in a different way. Now, this plays out now, even nowadays in the context of Korban Pesach. There are those in Israel that want to bring a Korban Pesach on the Temple Mount, even today. And they say that you can do it within halachic requirements. And one of the things they base themselves on, and this goes back to the arguments made in the 19th century, is that the halacha says that even when the temple is destroyed, the sanctity of the Temple Mount is there and you can bring sacrifices. And when this issue came up, in the 19th century, late 19th century, Rav Kalisher, a student of the Chassam Sofer, Rav Ettlinger pushed back. And Rav Ettlinger says that even though the halacha says that the Temple Mount retains its sanctity, the end of the verse that the rabbis learned that from is God saying that once they're destroyed, I will no longer smell the pleasing odor. And what Rav Ettlinger says is that in theory, sacrifices could be brought, but God is telling us that this is a time where he no longer is interested in the odor of the sacrifices, in the scent of the sacrifices. The way to worship God now is not through sacrifices. If we ever want to go back there, God has to tell us that at this stage in history, now he wants that pleasing scent again. And this is an embracing of modernity and accepting the change that occurred and recognizing that that change that occurred in history with the destruction of the temple, in a way, is God telling us that the worship of God takes place now in a different way. And maybe this is something that we can reflect on as we've gone through our own transition around Corona and the changing world, and now we're going to be re-entering. What are we thinking about how much we want to be returning to the old way, and how much we want to be saying that things in the world have changed, and maybe that's telling us something about the type of way we have to change as well. We have to think of new approaches to our responsibility vis-a-vis the world and larger society. Shabbat Shalom.